Am I ADHD or am I just a mess?
It's a hard one, isn't it? Because there's so many similarities between ADHD symptoms and that of being just a mess. I mean, I think I'm both, personally.
Yeah, it's like this cause and correlate. Like,
Yeah.
you can't really say what came first.
Yeah.
Am I a mess because of my ADHD,
Yeah.
or does my ADHD make me a mess, or
Am I just a mess?
Am I just a mess?
Yeah.
I think in general I'm just a mess.
Yeah, I
think the
agree.
ADHD definitely exaggerates the messiness of me.
And there is actually a reason behind why we decided to do this podcast today. It was your idea.
It was my idea, but I'm going to actually have to say that I had this conversation with Matt, and he told me that I had to give him credit in the episode, because if I didn't, he was going to sabotage the podcast, whatever that means. So yeah, we were speaking on Friday, we were having a bit of a debate, and he was talking about ADHD and people using ADHD as an excuse, and talking about, you know, the stuff you see on social media and people just, you know, thinking they have ADHD. Whereas, is it that you actually have ADHD, or are you just a mess?
Yeah.
Or, you know, like, what is the first thing there? Like, is it messiness? Is it ADHD? You know? So that's kind of how the idea for this episode came across.
I didn't know if it was you'd had a bit of a messy week yourself and you were asking the question to Matt whether you were, am I actually just a mess or do I have ADHD? But that makes sense.
I mean, every week is a messy week.
So what is the difference between clinically diagnosed ADHD and being a mess?
I think the two differences are, so ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. To be able to be diagnosed with ADHD, symptoms have to be shown throughout your whole life and consistently as well. And so I think if you're sat there and you're thinking, do I have ADHD or am I just a mess? Try thinking back to your childhood. Were the symptoms always there? Did you always struggle with certain things? Is it something that's consistent, or is it, you know, if you're really stressed and you're extra chaotic, are you just feeling that way because of the stress at that time? Like, once the stress is gone, do all the other symptoms go away as well? So thinking about whether it's been throughout your whole life, is it consistently there? It's not just there during times of stress or, you know, change and things like that. Is it something that is a consistent problem that your day-to-day actually struggles with it? Is probably the two things that I would think about.
And I think bringing it back to women, so obviously the majority of our listeners are women, I think that's really significant when it comes to our cycle, because the week before your period, when you're in your luteal phase and you have PMS, I think regardless of whether you have ADHD or not, you can still struggle that week before your period, and you can feel really depressed. You can lack concentration, lack motivation, like all of those things. So that week before, even if you don't have ADHD, you might be thinking, oh, I can't be bothered to go to work today. Can't bother to reply to that text, you know, whatever it might be. And then you might see an ADHD post on TikTok in that period of time when you're really vulnerable before you come on your period, and think, oh, maybe I do have ADHD. So it is hard, I think, harder for women because we're so different throughout our cycle.
Because there's so much changes in how we feel throughout our cycle, throughout our lives as well. And it is really difficult to be able to separate the two sometimes. And I mean, there are a lot of women who are late diagnosed. They're not diagnosed until, you know, postpartum, having children, going through menopause, because typically women are so much better at masking. So it might seem as if we're a lot more high functioning and don't have as many struggles. But the reason a lot of women find out later is because they are working 10 times harder, but they have the estrogen, they have all the hormones that help bring them up. And then as soon as that drops, it becomes a lot more difficult to actually put that mask up and try and maintain it. So it is not as simple as being like, oh yeah, you go in this box, you go in this box, especially for women, because there are so many other factors that come into play with it.
Yeah, I think it's difficult though as well, because we now live in a society where I would say ADHD is spoken about more than any condition, it feels like. and almost people want to label themselves as, oh, I'm so
Yeah.
ADHD.
But it's the same thing as I remember, like, being younger in school, and people would just always be like, "Oh, I'm so bipolar, I'm so OCD, I'm so this," like, giving themselves a label of
mm,
like, "Oh, well, all my pens need to be in a certain colour order, so, oh, I'm so
so
OCD,"
OCD,
or
yeah.
like, "1 week I'm sad and this week I'm actually feeling a lot better, so I'm so bipolar," and it's those generalizations that actually cause a lot of problems around people who are actually diagnosed with
Mm.
ADHD, because it kind of lessens an actual diagnosis. Um, and I think it's really important to have a look at it in terms of ADHD impairments and actually what traits you have as a person. Like, you can be a forgetful person, that's completely fine. Like, you forget your keys here or you forget an appointment, but is it an impairment on your life? Is it
Yeah.
something that you struggle with every single day? That's trying to make the difference of it, like, being a trait or whether it's an actual ADHD symptom.
And I also feel like there's so many comorbidities.
Mm,
So a lot of the traits kind of overlap. So it can look like anxiety.
mm,
I've been diagnosed with OCD and ADHD, and I would never have thought actually that I had ADHD. I thought it was OCD, but that was masking the ADHD. So I think that kind of makes it a little bit more difficult because they do just naturally overlap each other. So
mm.
what might look like ADHD could actually just be generalized anxiety disorder, and the other way around. And that's why I think it's so important to get the diagnosis
Yes.
rather than to try and assume and figure it out yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult because, yeah, not everyone is able to get the diagnosis. Obviously, there's
It is
really
very, very
long
difficult. Yeah.
wait lists with the NHS and right to choose, and going private is very expensive. And so I think that's why there's almost been the shift in culture of people going to social media for self-diagnosis.
Yeah.
But the problem with this is social media is not, they're not experts. Then the videos are not created to, actually give you an answer. It's created to reel you in. Um, and it creates that whole thing of being like jumping on the bandwagon almost of like, oh, well, everyone's got ADHD now. It's not, it's like the same thing as like gay people and transgender people. Back in the day, people are, oh, well, no one was gay in my time. And it
Yeah.
was like, yes,
Yes, they were.
yes, they were. It just wasn't really spoken about. And it's the same with ADHD. It's like, it has always been there. The reason why it might feel like there are so many more people talking about it now, and why it might feel like, oh, everyone's got it now, is because there is so much more awareness
Mm,
around it. But it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? There is a lot of awareness, which means more people are talking about it. But with more people talking about it means there is so much more misinformation and miseducation, especially on like social media.
yeah, and I think on that note, it's very easy for someone to put up a TikTok video saying, "Oh, if you might have ADHD if you do this." I'm like, "You are tired. You are not
Mm,
motivated," and like very generalized symptoms or behaviors. So especially vulnerable young people that are on these
mm,
apps. Especially, I feel like when you're a teenager, I'm being really vulnerable. We spoke about Tumblr before.
yeah,
You're really vulnerable to this kind of thing. It's when you're going through these hormonal shifts, and you might see that, and actually, you're just a teenager and you're really struggling.
yeah,
And you just have normal teenager symptoms like not being motivated, because I think most teenagers go through
yeah.
that. And you could look at that and then be like, oh, I have 3 of those symptoms on there, so I must be
Mm.
ADHD.
It is really difficult. I think, like you said, those at that age you were so vulnerable,
Mm.
and it is that almost like searching for
An answer.
identity and searching for an
Mm.
answer too. And you're trying to find something that explains why you're
Mm.
feeling that way. And I don't want to put down anyone who's actually got
Yeah,
ADHD and has found, the answer through social media.
absolutely
But
not.
I would say a high percentage of these people are people who, might be struggling because of their hormones, they're growing up,
Yep.
it's not an easy time. And being able to see this like content that reaffirms some of the ways that you feel is so easy to jump on.
Yeah.
But I did see a stat, and it was something like 75% of like social media content around ADHD is actually not clinically,
Inaccurate.
yeah, it's not clinically
Wow.
accurate. And so much of this is created to make you watch it. And I've seen a lot of videos of people talking about ADHD baiting, and it's, you know, it's content designed to make every single person go, wait, is that me? Regardless of actually whether it applies to you. So it's so general things. And I was speaking to someone the other day who was like, oh, well, I saw a video on Facebook the other day about late diagnosed autism in women. And they said, here's the 7 signs that you might be a late diagnosed autistic woman. She was like, oh my God, yes, that applies to all of me. And it was like things like, struggling with social situations when you were younger, crying at the thought of public speaking and things like that.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and I was thinking, okay, yeah, I'm not dismissing that those were some things that you were struggling with. But realistically, how many people can say they struggled with social situations when they were in primary school and they cried? Yeah, they cried at the thought of public speaking. Like, it is so general.
Yeah.
And yes, it is symptoms that people with autism definitely struggle with. But a lot of like neurotypical people struggle with that as well.
Yeah, there's a lot more than just a few symptoms, and that's why going and getting an accurate diagnosis with somebody who is, you know, able to clinically diagnose you, look back at your childhood, spot different patterns is so important. But in the same breath, I understand why people would turn to TikTok, to podcasts, when they're feeling really lost and they don't know what's going on, because that is really, that it almost feels like accurate information because it's a lived experience. And it's not to say that it isn't accurate information. And if you are, I mean, I know that people who have listened to our podcast, some of them have probably listened to an episode and may have gone and got a diagnosis, which is actually what we hope for as well. We want this to be something that's relatable, and that people can look and think, oh my God, I feel seen. I don't feel alone anymore. I understand myself. Maybe I've got ADHD. So there is that half of the videos which are really helpful. But at the same time, I think you have to remember that not everything you see online is complete gospel truth.
It's quite surface level, I would say, as well. Like a lot of the TikToks that you will see about, you know, signs of ADHD, yeah, a lot of them are accurate, but it's quite surface level. And to watch a few videos and go, oh, I must have ADHD, without actually researching outside of TikTok, outside of social media, like actually being able to look at some of the other experiences, that is the main problem there. Because don't get me wrong, I think social media is amazing for people being able to recognize, you know, traits of autism or ADHD in themselves. But then it's the after of it. Like, have you actually researched it? Have you actually looked into it? Have you actually thought about your life and spoken to, you know, other family members and things like that, rather than just taking that one video as gospel truth? And it is trying to like look at the differences in the traits. Like, there is such a big difference between saying, oh, you know, I forgot to reply to a text, and then being like, I've forgotten to reply to text in 3 weeks, and the thought of replying to everyone is making me paralyzed and is making me like really anxious and upset. And, you know, I'm just avoiding speaking to everyone because they're going to think that I'm an awful person because I haven't replied to their message. Like the two differences, like one of them is just, you know, a normal person maybe being a little bit rubbish. The other is someone with ADHD who's actually really struggling to, you know, reply to their friends and things like that. So these TikToks don't go into detail.
No.
But it's an algorithm. The algorithm rewards everyone. It gets pushed out to everyone who likes it gets pushed out to similar people. It's not made really to, you know, target specific groups. It's made to be like a engagement process.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The more you can create generalized content, the more you can engage people and get rewards from it.
And I think it unfortunately takes it away then, the struggles of someone with ADHD, because people are so quick to not, you know, say that they've got ADHD without really knowing the truth behind whether or not they have it. And it really takes it away from the struggles between, like you've just mentioned, no, is it actually, I just didn't feel like replying to that text today, or have I been paralyzed for the past week thinking about replying to that small text or small email? So having that generalized approach on TikTok really takes it away from what is actually a huge experience for people with ADHD.
Yeah, exactly. And TikTok doesn't care. if you
No,
have
of course it
ADHD.
doesn't.
TikTok cares if you feel seen enough to share it.
Yeah.
And it can't
To get views.
Yeah, to get views. That's all it cares about. So, you know, if you can make content that everyone feels connected to, that's all that it wants. That's all what the algorithm wants.
Yeah.
So I think it's more about being more mindful when you are scrolling through TikTok. And like, I do want to say that it is really good, and a lot of people have been diagnosed or like recognize the traits in themselves because of it, and that's why it's so good, because there's so much awareness about
absolutely.
it. But it's more of being able to take out a lot of the ADHD content on TikTok that is just made to get the algorithm, to get that engagement, rather than the one that's actually there to educate you.
Yeah, and I think and it's really important because because of all of these conditions overlap so closely. You can't just take a few symptoms or behaviors and assume that's ADHD, because, like I've mentioned, that could be linked to anxiety, depression, borderline personality disorder. There's a lot of different disorders which are very similar. And what that means is that you could go down the route of getting an ADHD diagnosis, which, you know, if you don't have ADHD, the chances are you won't get diagnosed. But then you won't get the right support that you need.
But also, if you're sat there like thinking that you might have ADHD and you do go for a diagnosis and you get told that you don't have ADHD, not having a diagnosis is actually as powerful as getting a diagnosis, because then you can go, okay, if I'm actually struggling and it's not ADHD, then what is it that is making me struggle? And I know a lot of people will sit there and they want answers, and a lot of people who seek a diagnosis are probably hoping that they're going to get a diagnosis, and it can be a bit disappointing if you don't get one, because then you're like, well, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be upset being told that you don't have ADHD.
No.
You know, it's actually probably a lot better.
It's probably better, but it means that you can go down the route of finding out what it is and then getting the right support and treatment. So obviously when I went for my general assessment and got diagnosed with OCD, I always knew I had OCD, but actually the ADHD was way more powerful. So you could have ADHD and something else, but maybe the ADHD is a little less prevalent and the other disorders are actually a lot more prevalent. And you've got to treat that first disorder first before you kind of trying to tackle the second.
Yeah, and it's so difficult as well, because when there's other conditions, it changes.
They just all overlap with each other as well.
And there's so many different, like every single neurodivergent person is different as well. And it's like you can meet one ADHD person and like you can meet another one and they could be completely different. Like even me and you, we are so different in what we struggle with. And then like we have friends who have ADHD and they're completely different to what we struggle with. And so you can't generalize it.
What is it? It's if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person.
That's it.
Because we are just all so different. And that's, you know, we know we've mentioned a lot throughout the podcast already, but TikTok is so generalized. And actually, you could see a TikTok video and see all of these symptoms and think, I display none of those, so I must not have ADHD.
Yeah, sometimes I see a TikTok and it's like ADHD people struggle with this the most, and I'm like, I've actually never struggled with that, and that then makes me self-doubt. Okay, do I have ADHD? So, you know, it's like there are a list of symptoms that they will use to diagnose you with. You don't need to tick every symptom off on the list. You need to tick off a certain amount. Some people might tick off more, you know, inattentive, impulsivity, you know, emotional dysregulation. And that is completely fine. That doesn't diminish your ADHD. It just means that that's what you struggle with.
Yeah. I mean, this is the whole reason why women took so long to get diagnosed, because we were just brainwashed from the internet and conversations that it was just naughty schoolboys and hyperactive, naughty schoolboys. That was ADHD. And that misinformation meant that so many women didn't get diagnosed. So that's why I think we just need to be very careful what we're reading on the internet.
Yeah, definitely. Making sure that when you are like looking at this content, you are looking at it with a mind of being able to, you know, dissect it rather than just take it as what it is.
Yeah.
I think saying all that though, it's important that you can acknowledge that you can be struggling a lot and it still not be ADHD, and that is completely valid as well. Like if you are struggling, you still deserve support. So just looking at what's going on in your life, are you burnt out from work? You know, are you grieving? Do you have a terrible job? Are you struggling in a relationship?
Yeah.
You know, all these things can make you feel like you have ADHD. But the question is, was it there before? Like, is it those things that are causing you to feel like you're struggling? Is there something else that's going on? Or has it always been there? And that is a good question to ask yourself. You know, if you're sat there thinking, am I ADHD or am I just a mess? Think about the situation that you are currently in.
Yeah. And really, there's no other way to find the answer to that than to go and get a diagnosis. And like we said, I know that's not easy for everyone. And the NHS make it really fucking difficult unless you're going private. You know, I feel very privileged that I was able to do that. So I really do empathize with anyone who is asking that question and is on a really long waiting list. But yeah, unfortunately, there is no other way of really knowing without going and seeing a professional.
And it's still, even if you don't have the money to go private, just go to your GP. I know GPs get a lot of shit for not being very good. A lot of people do have really good GPs. I'm quite lucky to have a really good understanding GP. And if you do have one, like, it is so worth it just going and speaking to them and talking to them about your struggles. And at the end of the day, they are the expert. They will be able to tell you whether they think a diagnosis is right for you or if it is something else. And if they're unsure and they think, you know, it might be worth going for an assessment, just go on the right to choose wait lists. Like, a lot of the wait list people now are actually not that long. Like, people wait 6 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure, it's better just to be on the wait list and wait than just sat there wondering if you're having it and just constantly doom scrolling and consuming all this content that's telling you one thing and another thing. Is just, you know, go speak to the experts who know what they're talking about and can actually speak to you individually and be able to give you a certain answer rather than a generalist answer.
I think what's really interesting about what you've just mentioned as well is that as someone with ADHD, it can make it very easy to put that off. Like, I put it off for years getting diagnosed. Well, I didn't. I mean, I actually didn't put it off for years. But going for a psychiatric assessment and find out what it actually is that was wrong with me, not specifically ADHD, took years. And I look back and think, oh my God, I wish I would have just done that sooner and had the answers sooner rather than just thinking, oh, I've got anxiety or I'm feeling depressed today, or do you know what I mean? Like, I think that unfortunately, if you do have ADHD, it can make that just booking a doctor's appointment is difficult when you've got ADHD. So
it is. It's not as easy as saying just go and do it. It is a whole journey as well. Like,
massively
going through the whole thought of thinking if you need an assessment. You know, even that first step of talking to someone. I know there's a lot of self-doubt there as well, because when I went and spoke to my GP, I just thought they were going to think that I was stupid or being dramatic, or like I doubted that I actually had it. So yeah, it's not as easy, but you know, if you are struggling and you think you have that self-doubt, write it all down. That is like the best advice I would give, is like write it all down, like keep a diary of the things that you struggle with. And so when you are ready to take that first step, you literally have everything on paper for you to talk about. And that's what I did, because I know if I go into doctors and they go, so why are you here? I'm like, I'm all right, thank you.
Or you'll forget everything.
Or I forget everything. I'm like, well, I think I've got ADHD. And they're like, why? And I'm like, I forgot.
That's probably actually one of the best examples. So moving on to the next section, ADHD is not an excuse, but is it an explanation? I think this is really interesting, because there's been a lot since I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I think I have sometimes lent into you know, I've got no motivation today. Must be the ADHD. And actually, you can just be unmotivated and be having a shitty week because maybe you come on your period, or maybe you've been drinking too much alcohol, you've not had enough sleep. And any neurotypical person would feel unmotivated if they
had done
that.
Yeah.
So is it, you know, yes, it's an explanation for it, but I think sometimes I do lean on it probably a little bit too much, and I almost use it as an excuse when actually it's like, Emily, look at the way you're living your life at the moment. That's probably not helping with your ADHD.
Yeah. It's like it has like your ADHD probably has an impact on it, but there are other areas of your life that also make you feel that way. And I think it's difficult because ADHD is not an excuse for being a shitty person, for not doing certain things, but it is an explanation of why you do certain things. And I think it can really be easy to fall into that trap of being like, oh, well, I just can't do this because of my ADHD, or I really don't want to book that appointment because I've got ADHD. And yes, things are a little bit harder, a lot harder, but I think sometimes it can be just the easy way out of being like,
It can.
oh, well, I've got ADHD. So it's trying to figure out of, are you using it as an excuse, or are you using it as a way to explain it? I think it all comes back to that accountability of it as well.
Yeah, and I think there's different ways when using it as an explanation is really important. And for me, that's been work, and being able to ask for those reasonable work adjustments for 2 days work from home, because actually being in the office does really affect me, whether it's feeling overstimulated, just liking to have my own space and my own routines in a morning rather than having to commute. I know a lot of workplaces would think, oh, like they're just using that as an excuse to work from home. No, it's not.
No.
It's not an excuse. And you are allowed to use that as an explanation to get what you need. And you should never feel like that's, especially in the workplace, I think you should never feel like you're being made to think that, they're just using it as an excuse to get away with things.
It's about like using your ADHD to explain the patterns that you struggle with to yourself and to others. So like the workplace, like being able to say what is useful, what is necessary, like what you need to be able to get the job done. Whereas I think if you're using it as an excuse, you're using your ADHD to avoid that accountability, to avoid that growth of what you need.
Yeah.
Or just like avoid doing the work. So like try and think about what one you tend to lean towards. And I think, using it as an explanation to get reasonable work adjustments, that's not using it as an excuse.
No.
That's an explanation.
Absolutely.
If you are using ADHD as a reason to not do any housework and your roommate is doing all your housework, that's an excuse.
Yeah. And also, I think that something that I've done, and I've spoken about it before, and not replying to people, yes, it's an explanation, but also there has to become a point where I have to remember that these are people that care about me, that I care about, and me not replying to someone for a week because, yes, I feel, overwhelmed and overstimulated, is still, to an extent, it's not an explanation. So it's a hard one because, yes, it's an explanation, and I can say, oh, I'm feeling really overwhelmed this week. It will take me longer to reply to messages. But at the same time, these are people that I care about and that care about me, and that maybe message me to check in for an update, and then I'm taking forever to respond. That's disrespectful on them. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's actually quite difficult, and that's, at that point, it's me taking accountability for what is it that's making me feel overwhelmed, that means that I can't respond to the people that matter most. Because if I've got all of my attention and motivation elsewhere, and I'm really stressed and I'm not sleeping enough, then that is going to make it harder. So maybe I need to prioritize those things in my life that make me feel less overwhelmed so that I can respond to people.
Yeah. There's no real, I don't think you can't use ADHD as an excuse to treat people badly. Not that I'm saying that you treat people badly, but it's more about if you are constantly letting people down, you're not treating them nicely, and then you're saying, oh, well, I have ADHD, so I need to put this in place, I need to do that. There's always those people that are oh, I'm just protecting my peace, I'm just protecting my boundaries, and it's that is completely fine. But when people are doing it to the extent of being oh, well, I'm not going to speak to you, or I can't see you on these days, and it's repeatedly doing it. And yes, I know we've spoken about putting boundaries in place, and that is super important. But there is a difference between putting boundaries in place because you have ADHD and then just using it as an excuse to just be
a shit person,
basically.
Yeah, I think ultimately ADHD is real, it's serious, and it's definitely underdiagnosed in women, which is really why this whole podcast, one of the reasons why this podcast exists. But the conversation around it online has gotten messy in ways that don't serve everyone. And that's why it's really, really important to just be conscious of the things that you're reading online and not looking at a few different reels and thinking, I've got ADHD. You could just be struggling and be a little bit messy.
I still don't know if I've ADHD or a mess. I'm going to say both.
I'm saying both. Let us know in the comments what you are.
See you next week for another episode of Hold On. What was I saying?